Welcome to another episode of BUFORD PUSSER, The Other Story. With me today is Dennis Hathcock. You may recognize the last name as his family was really connected with the state line and with the story of BUFORD PUSSER. I might go on to say that a lot of what we know about the state line, Hathcocks, came from a lot of books, a lot of movies, most of them that did not tell the true story. And that's the purpose of these videos. Dennis, how are you doing today?
Doing good. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fine. Hey, can you tell us a little bit about Jack and Louise, how they met, how they became involved with the state line?
Well, Jack went to work down at the old state line, what they call the old state line. Went to work for Mr. Timlick. And Louise came up there from West Point. Like I said, there's a very poor area back then, and she came up there to try to go to work, get a job as a waitress. Jack fell in love with her. Romance took on the rest of it, you know.
Now, where did this occur? Do you remember the club or who hired them? Or
Yeah, it was at the old state line, and but Mr. Timlick hired Jack to work there.
Now, is that Nelson or Shug?
Oh, no, Nelson.
Okay. And how long, do you have any idea how long it was before Louise came on the scene?
Well, I've heard my mother tell, but I can't remember. It wasn't that long, maybe a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years, something like that.
Now, was she also hired by Nelson, or I understand that she was hired by Shug Timlick?
Probably. Say Shug actually ran the place. It was owned by Nelson, but Shug actually ran it.
Okay. Now, of course, I think everybody knows that they fell in love. They got married. A lot of people aren't familiar with the real story. They see the walking tall version of what happened, and they believe everything there to be true. One thing that kind of caught my attention is that Jack and Louise got married 2 months before BUFORD was even born.
Right.
And the movie doesn't really put that time into context. But at any rate, I also understand that Jack acquired the State Line Club from Nelson Timlick. Can you share anything about that?
Well, right. They was born. Right. And like I said, he worked for him, and they decided they wanted to sell it, and Jack bought it and paid it out. Was supposed to pay him so much a month for it, you know.
And I also understand that the State Line Club eventually became the 45 Grill.
That's correct.
Now, and while it was a 45 Grill and Jack and Louise had that, I understand is when Towhead actually came onto the scene. Is that correct?
Him and Junior Smith, they were from Clarksdale, and they came up there together. They came up around the state line together.
So there was an association that began there with everyone.
Right.
And then the state line, or pardon me, the 45 Grill burned to the ground on Christmas Day one year. And then they reinvented the place as the Shamrock.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, you know, the 45 Club was just a you know, pretty normal like most of the other nightclubs around there. But when they built the Shamrock, it was actually like a showpiece in that part of the country. It was a very, very nice motel, very nice restaurant, and they served nothing but the very best of food. They had a big business, food business. And of course, you know, they had a lot of local business. And then, of course, being right there on Highway 45, the main highway between Chicago and down on the coast, they had a lot of business from that. So
lots of tourist traffic through there.
Tourist traffic.
Now, as far as the Shamrock goes, I understand that, you know, of course, they were making a living out of that place, pretty good living, as a matter of fact, and that, oh, how can you put this? Of course, I've posted a page on my Facebook page where they are being tourists are being not to stop at the Shamrock because of gambling and so on and so forth. But there really wasn't much gambling that went on, to my understanding. Can you tell me what occurred there and how it occurred?
Well, they blew the gambling way, way out of proportion because I was young kid, but you know, I was around then, and basically at the restaurant part, you know, and it wasn't even Jack and Louise that was doing it. It was people with the carnival. They would come and rent rooms at the motel. They like 3 or 4 rooms, and they'd stay there during the winter. Well, then they wanted to run, I guess you'd call it a razzle game. And that was who would take their money. You know, if you came in late, that's who ran the cash register. And when you came up to pay, they'd ask you, do you want to play this game of chance? We called it, I forgot what they called it, but it was just an old carny game that, or they used a couple of dice in a whip cup and you threw them out and they added them up, and then they got so many numbers and this and that, and it looked almost impossible for them to lose. And then those people that want to bet money, and of course they did lose.
But I also understand, though, that when I've gone back through FBI reports and so on and so forth, that there wasn't really much other form of gambling that went on. The FBI reports referred to the razzle game quite often, which was played in other locations like the White Iris and the Pecan Farm. But other than that, there wasn't a casino in any of these places.
No, not a casino like they want to make out like it's like Las Vegas or something. They had like every nightclub in the country or beer joint or night. People would come in there and as regular customers, and they'd sit over there at a table and play cards. And of course, they'd be some people, local people, thought they were sharks, card sharks. They'd be out there wanting to hang around and play. Over at my daddy's place, over at the Plantation, he had a little old dice table back there that looked like something almost that a kid made. It one.
And
Go back to.
Whoop, you broke up there just a little bit, Dennis.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you broke up there just a little bit. You were saying that your dad basically had a homemade dice table.
Had a little old homemade dice table made out of some plywood. I went down there and was there when he was building it and handing him tools and stuff. Anyway, and over there across the street at the Shamrock, about basically the same thing. I think they did have a better dice stable over there, but you know, that it wasn't just there. Up at the stables, up at all kinds of nightclubs around there. They had gambling back then. And it wasn't like it was that unusual.
So, you know, I know that there was gambling that went on at some of the places in Corinth. You know, and you mentioned the stables. That was a big place for gambling back in the days.
Right.
But nothing like what we saw in Walking Tall is what you're saying.
Not hardly. No, none of them.
How did your dad, W.O., get started with the Plantation Club? What had he done before that?
Well, he worked for Jack. Of course, Jack was his uncle. Unlike some of the books, I mean, that shows how much they even knew. They put in some of the books they were brothers. Well, they weren't brothers. They were, Jack was Daddy's uncle, and he worked for him. And he decided after he and Mother got married that he would go out on his own, and they went across the street. He went and bought the property right across the street from the Shamrock. And all they basically did was sell bonded whiskey. And I was born there in a little old trailer, a little bitty trailer. That's all it was. And then after a couple of years, they built the Plantation Club. And of course, the Plantation Club, Jack didn't like that. Didn't like that at all, and that's why you'll hear some of them claim they didn't get along. Well, that's not true. He just didn't like that Daddy put in a place right across in front of him.
Now, just for those that aren't terribly familiar with the story, we're talking about Jack and W.O. Hathcock, William Odell Hathcock
Jr.
Okay. So they operated right across the highway from each other, with the Shamrock basically having the restaurant in Mississippi and the motel in Tennessee. The Plantation Club was there on the Mississippi side.
Right. It wasn't even in Tennessee.
Yet Walking Tall shows an entirely different story there. And those are some of the rumors that I'm trying to dispel.
Mike, let me interrupt something.
Sure.
Just a second. BUFORD Pusser, as far as my dad and the plantation, had absolutely zero authority to even be down there. He was sheriff in McNairy County, Tennessee, not in Alcorn County, Mississippi, which is where the place was.
Well, I also think that a lot of people who believe that the movie was true don't understand that the Plantation Club was actually closed down even before Buford became sheriff in McNairy County, Tennessee.
Right. It was closed before Pusser was ever even sheriff or thought about being sheriff.
So I don't know, that there's just so many stories, so much misinformation out there. A lot of people actually believe that in Walking Tall, like it was a documentary, when it was actually a movie that was shot for entertainment purposes. And Phil Carlson actually took what was basically the script from the Phoenix City story over in Phoenix City, Alabama, and just adapted it to Walking Tall. Made basically the same movie with just different characters. And as far as I know, there wasn't hardly a soul from Phoenix City that showed up to at the state line, as a lot of people claim. Do you who do you know?
Fannie Bell Barker, the one that they call the Queen of Hearts down there. She was originally from Corinth, And when they closed Phoenix City down, she came back, and one or two other people that originally were from Corinth and had gone to Phoenix City came back. That's about 3 people is all it was.
But did any of them ever actually operate at the state line where Buford was?
No, absolutely not.
So we can kind of put all that to rest. Real quick, let's talk about what the state line did deal in. And a lot of people have the misconception that they were into a lot of the white whiskey.
No, I doubt if after the Shamrock was built, and even at the 45 Club, and I know with Daddy, the plantation, and when I was born in that little old trailer over there, I doubt if there was one drop of white whiskey ever sold on the state line.
But
because as Daddy, I've heard my daddy talk about people that get caught selling white whiskey. He'd say, well, they must be some kind of idiot, because you make more money on the bonded whiskey if you're selling it. And the tax has been paid on it. It's the federal government. People don't understand. They could care less how much whiskey you sold, as long as it's called bonded whiskey. It's the tax is paid on it. The only thing about selling it was there wasn't a local tax on it that was paid. Of course, that's the reason you paid those sheriffs and paid them. There wasn't any tax, and it was nothing but a misdemeanor is all it was. It wasn't like I said, I understand the white whiskey part.
So for people that don't understand, when we're talking about white whiskey, we're actually talking about moonshine.
Right.
And moonshine, that basically did not happen at the state line.
Right. And now today they can go in any liquor store in the United States and buy white whiskey, because it's become kind of like something that's popular, but it's legal because the federal tax is paid on it.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm really wanting to point out here is that a lot of what we saw in Walking Tall just wasn't true. It was a very entertaining movie. I loved it myself. I thought it was, as far as the entertainment value, and for a long time, I was like everyone else. I thought that was a true story. I was in law enforcement at the time, and I just wanted to learn more about Buford and what all he went through. And when I started to really research it, I found out that very little of that story is true.
Well, I understand people that saw the movie. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. Of course, knowing what I knew, we all thought. But anyway, I understand them believing it, because it was, I guess, thrown out there for people to think was a fact. But it was far, far from the truth.
They used to play on words, that because they would say it was based on certain events in his life that, trailers would claim it was a true movie, so on and so forth. Back then, I think another thing that people don't understand is, like W.R. Morris wrote a lot of books about Buford. And in doing so, the first one he wrote, 12th of August, was one where he was under contract with Buford and telling Buford's story. So he told it Buford's way. I look back now, and I used to throw a lot of rocks at W.R. Morris for being so misleading in some of the books. But, looking back now, I think that had he had the internet and some of the things that we do today and was able to research the stories I have, he would have probably been telling a different story altogether than what he wrote back in the 70s.
I'm sure of that. And Mike, another thing, when they made the movie, see, they had Buford up there telling them on the movie all this crap and had them believing, the actors that came down, Joe Don, had them believing that they weren't even allowed to come to McNair County because their lives were in danger and all that kind of stuff.
I know that whenever I interviewed Bo Svensson that played Buford in the last two of the original Walking Tall franchise, he told me that, hey, the sheriff there gave him a gun up in the county where they filmed it, and that the movie producers told the cast not to go down and try to research their characters because they might not come back. And until we were talking that first day in November several years ago, he thought that the state line was probably still active. So it's funny in that regard. We're going to have to be cutting this short here, but I will tell you that I do want you to come back because we've got a whole lot to discuss about what went on at the state line as far as your dad's place, the Plantation Club, Buford's claim that he was robbed, cut up, beaten at the Plantation Club, left for dead. We need to talk a little bit about Buford's trial and all in that about when the Plantation Club robbery took place. And we just don't have time to do it in one of these short segments. But anyway, we'll get you back on here very soon, and we'll talk about all that. Is there anything else that you'd like to say while I've got you here?
Not really, except for the people watching it that question what you're saying. All I can say is that Mike Elam, from the book I've read, I can tell you it's the very, very closest to what's the truth. And I have not one thing in it. I have nothing to gain by promoting Mike Elam. He's not kin to me as some of the others try to make out like, but it's the closest thing there is to the real truth.
Well, I thank you for that. And book he's referring to is, I wrote this book, Buford Pusser, The Other Story. I also have a Facebook page named the same thing where I share a lot of information. The whole idea is just to put a lot of these things into proper perspective, try to get back to the true story, show how the Walking Tall was for entertainment purposes only. But Dennis, I'll have you back here before long, and I'm sure people will be interested in what you have to say about the Plantation Club and later on your dealings with Buford.
Okay. And I'm sure, Mike, if any of them have any questions they want to ask me, they can send it to you. You can ask me the next time if I'm on here.
Sounds good. That sounds like a plan. Dennis, okay. Until next time, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.